Welcome to Sacred Cow Shipyards, where no ship is safe from being taken down to its nuts and bolts. Alrighty then, I know that some of y'all have been bothering me to talk about ships from the bright and shiny and new series Expanse, although I guess it's not that new anymore in your particular timeline. And I know that y'all want me to talk about one ship in particular because it's basically the ship that gets all the airtime in the series, although there is another ship that is a little more interesting, but doesn't have guns, so probably not interesting to use squishies. Anyways, we're going to get there. If I keep doing these me rambling on for 10 minutes at a time things, we'll get there. But instead, right now, I'm going to pull a Battlestar Galactica episode on you and do a meta conversation about the universe of The Expanse, because you have to appreciate the details. Now, the first fun detail is how The Expanse handles artificial gravity. They don't. There's no such thing. They don't go for the hand-wavium nonsense of whatever. They just ignore the entire f***ed up nonsense of artificial gravity and how it might or might not be generated. Easy enough. What they do instead is pay attention to, elementary level physics, in that when a ship is accelerating, acceleration is basically gravity. In fact, the gravity of your planet, the gravity of every fucking planet, is expressed as a vector of acceleration. In your case, it's 9.8 meters per second squared down. Well, as soon as you start measuring things in distance over time squared, that's acceleration. Well, guess what spaceships do when they want to get from point A to point B? They accelerate. And that acceleration, of course, induces a simulation of gravity that is pointed towards the very stern of the ship where the engines are pushing. And as long as you accelerate at 1g, as long as you accelerate 9.8 meters per second squared forward, the squishies inside the large metal box hurtling through the darkness of space are experiencing Earth normal, quote-unquote, gravity. This is why every ship in the Expanse is basically constructed like a skyscraper, not like a nautical ship of your current planet in its current fucking era. Unlike Star Wars and Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica and all the rest of those other big science fiction series things, Expanse ships, the decks go shortwise across the ship, not longwise across the ship. Because down on an Expanse ship, when it's under thrust, is towards the drive, which is at the back end of the ship. It makes life easy. Now, maintaining 1G of burn is actually kind of hard. You need a lot of fuel based on your technology of the current time. Expanse does this with some minor hand-waving, and we'll ignore that small detail. But the point is, that small hand-waving, and it is fairly small in comparison to a lot of science fiction shows, does allow for realistic intra-system travel. Because if you can maintain 1G of burn the entire way, you burn towards your destination halfway, you flip over, and then you burn towards your origin halfway. And that entire process is your acceleration-deceleration curve, and your passengers only have to deal with zero gravity for the time it takes you to flip your ship over. But that small detail not only makes interplanetary travel possible because you're constantly accelerating, but it also makes it not damaging to your horrible goddamn squishy bodies. Because fuck me running, y'all just fall the fuck apart if you're outside of a gravity well for too long. Your bones start decaying, your heart starts doing weird things, all kinds of stuff happens, and you don't want that dingo in your ass. Now, also speaking about how fragile your horrible little forms are, water's kind of a big deal for you. I mean, kind of a huge deal. Y'all have to constantly consume it, and then you turn around and constantly excrete it. I mean, what the fuck is wrong with you? Just store it somewhere and keep using it. Don't piss it out, literally. Come on. Anyways, Expanse goes into this and talks about how water storage on their ships is actually quite important. Because yes, not only do you squishies need it, it's actually used for a variety of purposes, one of which we will talk about momentarily. But the other ones include, say, shielding yourself from, that massive fucking fusion torch in the ass of the ship. Because water is actually a pretty good insulator. Now, technically, you wouldn't want to drink, water that's been exposed to massive quantities of radiation, because, again, your little squishy bodies can't really handle that. But they probably had separate tanks for certain things, and they probably spaced them out, and blah, 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 so on and so forth. But the point was, if a ship lost its water reserves, oh, you'd be fucked. And the real reason you'd be absolutely buggered sideways if you lost your water reserves on a interplanetary spaceship in the Expanse universe is because water lets you make oxygen. And this is where we get into the really fun part of the Expanse. If you take water and expose it to electric current, you can literally break the molecules apart into hydrogen and oxygen. Y'all kind of need oxygen to survive. The whole nitrogen stuff that makes up most of your atmosphere hangs around. You don't actually consume it. It will eventually leak out of any ship ever, because basically no ship is perfectly airtight. But you can replenish nitrogen pretty easily, give or take a little. The oxygen is kind of the hard part to come by. And water isn't the best way to store oxygen. Technically, literally compressed cylinders of oxygen would be better, because you can compress oxygen, and you can't compress water. But like we mentioned just a few minutes ago, water serves a lot of different purposes. So again, the Expanse actually thought ahead and made water serve a lot of different purposes. But atmosphere? Atmo's hard. I mean, as hard as it is to come by water out in the depths of space, coming by actual oxygen out in the depths of space is even harder. And like I said, the Expanse kind of short-circuits that by using water for multiple purposes. But the really cool thing is that on, I guess, theoretically most ships, they only show it on some ships, but if a warship is ever entering combat, specifically a warship that is not very heavily armored, a warship that is literally expecting to take hits and have them be problematic, when that warship is preparing to go into combat, they have their crew suit up. And yes, I know all you squishies out there who are unfamiliar with the rigors and dangers of spaceflight are just going, yeah, they're being suited up because what happens if the ship decompresses? I mean, you want them to be safe, right? Well, guess the what? They're suiting up those people because they already decompressed the ship. That's the point. You don't want to actually lose your atmosphere. So when a ship knows it's heading into combat, yeah, your squishies suit up, and then they suck all the atmosphere out of all the spaces and store it. This again serves multiple purposes. First, you don't lose the atmosphere when you get holed, because apparently some ships just get shot to shit. But also, any gases escaping from your ship, whether they be atmo or whatever, are imparting force on that ship. Again, you're in a zero gravity, zero friction, maximum inertia environment. So if you get holed through and you've got full pressure atmo inside, suddenly you've got these two jets of atmo shooting out the sides of your ship. And who knows what kind of rotational inertia they're imparting. This is bad. Now, yeah, as I mentioned, the Expanse is kind of inconsistent about this. Smaller ships seem to suit their people up when they go into combat. Larger ships don't seem to necessarily. If I had to make a wild-ass guess based on the environment that they're operating in, I'd say that the delineating line was probably the fact that bigger ships have enough armor that the point defense cannons that are so common in the Expanse universe don't actually puncture the hull of the ship. Only the much larger, much more powerful rail cannons do that, and the goal is to avoid getting shot by a rail cannon, whereas being shot by a PDC is pretty much inevitable. So big ships might not actually go to the effort of suiting up their crew. They probably have some teams scattered through the ship, basically damage control teams, who are already suited up and ready to go. But for smaller ships that don't have the mass allowance to armor themselves up, yeah, they're going to get perforated like Swiss cheese by a PDC, so they should go ahead and get ready for that, and mostly just bend over and kiss their asses goodbye, because if anything bigger than a PDC hits them, yeah, the suits aren't going to make a bit of difference. So yeah, I guess you could argue that getting your crew suited up is in preparation for depressurization of the ship, but the depressurization is deliberate, and again, you really have to appreciate the details. That someone sat down and thought that no, these ships wouldn't go into combat with a full belly full of air, because it's going to go out. It's just going to happen. So let's store it. And then, yeah, sure, if your ammo tanks get punctured, you're going to lose your ammo anyways. But At least that's a smaller target than the entire fucking ship. So anyways, The Expanse is a decent story. I have not actually personally read the books. I will say that Amazon's visual representation of it kind of loses the bubble along the way about what the actual story is about. But I'm not here for the story. I'm here for you Humies finally doing a fairly decent representation of how interplanetary travel would work, how intership combat might work, if you're not going to use lasers, and that's a different conversation, although they do use nuclear-tipped missiles, and as soon as you involve missiles in interstellar combat, it gets really complicated and not normally as furball-ish as the Expanse portrays it. But still, we'll gloss over that. And anyways, it's just pretty. So, good job, Humies. You did something that's not actually half horrible. And that's all from Sacred Cow Shipyards. Please be advised that any ship left on the dock for more than 24 hours will be compressed to a cube. Have a good day.